It's fair to say that the Austronesian languages span a large part of the globe. In fact, before the spread of the Indo-European language family, the geographical span of the Austronesian family was the largest the planet had to offer. This language family's most likely origin point is on the island currently known as Taiwan. But Taiwan is so small and it's bound by ocean. How could it have possibly started here of all places? Well, you see, the native people of this land weren't only good at speech, they were also incredible seafarers, and over the coming years they would sail throughout the Indian and Pacific Oceans, expanding the geographic location that the Austronesian family was spoken within. In fact, the expanse was so vast that modern linguists separate these Austronesian languages into two subgroups, these being the Oceanic language subgroup and the Malayo-Polynesian subgroup. The languages spoken on the islands nearest to Taiwan are those part of the Malayo-Polynesian subgroup. This subgroup was generally agreed upon by linguists studying the Austronesian languages. However, trying to further divide up this agreed upon subgroup was bound to create tension within the linguistic community. Today, we're going to take a closer look at the proposed Philippine subgroup and the evidence and controversy surrounding it. The Philippine subgroup has been a source of contention for decades. In Blust's words, at the turn of the 20th century, it had been implicitly accepted by scholars such as Blumentritt, Blake, Conant, and Brandstetter, all of whom assumed the subgroup's boundary coincided with the geographical boundary of the Philippines. Scholars later in the century, such as Conklin, Lopez, and Zorc, all began to write on the Philippine subgroup without the subgroup ever being implicitly justified. The first scholars to begin justifying this as a valid subgroup were Diane, Lambzon, and Charles. We'll take a closer look at Lambzon's work and how he justified the Philippine subgroup now. Lambzon chose 9 of the 80-odd languages in the Philippines to compare their phonology, morphology, and lexicon. The languages he chose are the following: Ilocano, Ibinag, Ifugao, Cebuano, Cancanay, Tagalog, Bacol, Hiligaynon, and Waray. He chose these 9 languages as they were sufficiently documented. He would eventually group these languages into a tree, with the tree branching off dependent of their innovations. Altogether though, this would show these languages were related enough to be deemed a Philippine subgroup, and would also present the prospect of a Proto-Philippine language. Very quickly, we'll compare the phonemic inventories of these 9 languages. Tagalog, Cebuano, Hiligaynon, Waray, and Bacol all have 3 vowels, 14 consonants, 2 semivowels, a phoneme indicating length, and a phoneme indicating stress. Ilocano has 4 vowels and 13 consonants, with the semivowels length and stress phonemes being the same as the prior. Cancanay is identical to Ilocano, however we swap the S for an H. Ibinag has 5 vowels and 13 consonants and the same semivowel length and stress as the prior languages. Ifugao has 5 vowels, 12 consonants, 2 semivowels, a phoneme for length, and 2 stress phonemes. Let's now go back to the family tree and look at the innovations and exclusively shared linguistic features each language had that caused them to be on different branches, according to Lambzon. To start with, if we look at these 2 tables, we can see a very clear distinction on where to begin dividing our languages. Subgroup 1 will be on the left and subgroup 2 will be on the right. These tables show both morphological differences and phonological differences between our new subgroups. The innovations for subgroup 1 are that G, R1, R2, R3, and R4 all become G, whilst for the subgroup 2, only G and J become G. The innovations for subgroup 3 are that U and E both become U when word finally. The innovations for subgroup 4 are that G, R3, and J become G when word finally, and that D and capital D move to D when word medially. The innovations for subgroup 5 are that U and E become U. The innovations for subgroup 6 are that R1, R, and medial J become I. And there you have it, the subgroupings of Philippine languages. After years of the Philippine family being implicitly accepted, we finally had working evidence to prove its existence. In fact, using this data, linguists were able to reconstruct Proto-Philippine. It was unanimously agreed upon that this was in fact a subgroup of Austronesian. Until after 8 decades of agreement and 15 years of so-called proof, Reed had had enough. Reed was about to publish his paper aptly named The Demise of Proto-Philippine. He criticized the looseness of the studies that came before him, though he seemed to ignore Diane's work. He reworked the Austronesian language tree and came up with this. And he did all of this in just 16 pages of work. Blust was not happy and fired back with 106 pages disproving Reed. He aptly named this paper The Resurrection of Proto-Philippines. Zorc wrote a reaction paper taking Blust's side in this argument. Even Reed eventually agreed that Blust had demolished his paper. And so this story does not end without controversy, but it ends nonetheless. Honestly, if you do have time, read The Demise and Resurrection of Proto-Philippine. I highly recommend them. I never realized just how aggressive and petty linguists could be until I read those papers. Okay, bye-bye.